The death of George Floyd reminds us of the depth of systemic racism and injustice in our world today. His brutal murder at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota was horrifically one of many where George's final words, "I can't breathe," are repeated in the lives of many in our world, in our nation, in our city and on our streets. Watching the video of our local shop owner having his door smashed in and objects thrown at him remind me that this isn't a distant issue but a very close one. I live in a city that is beautifully diverse, but one that, like many cities in our country, was founded on the pain and suffering, the death and destruction of the barbaric inhumanity of slavery. I live with the privilege of the colour of my skin, while my black, Asian and ethnic minority friends live with the oppression that this privilege costs them. Our nation, like the US, has an evil at its heart that is ripping it apart. Racism in all its forms separates one human from another. It's evil, it's wrong, it's unjust, and it must be recognised and rooted out wherever it exists, even in the shadows of our own hearts. Many friends have made wonderful suggestions about what to do and what not to do in response to racism, and I'm thankful for leaders like Matt Hatch and Tope Kaleso and PJ Smythe and writers like Ben Lindsay and Reno Lodge. Thank you. Their experience and advice help us to respond with wisdom. But I want to bring 5 quick things for us to think about today. Firstly, acknowledge that systemic racism, white privilege and injustice is one of the issues of our generation. We have grown up watching the headlines, but we have the responsibility to both acknowledge and do something about it. It may be the issue of our generation, but it doesn't have to be the issue of the next. Number 2, to live in the joy of God's creation, of all human beings being created as equal. As a Christian, I believe that God creates all of humanity equally. That in Christ we are one people. That the diversity of our world illustrates the beauty of God, and we're to pursue that. Number 3, to learn and grow and build multi-ethnic relationships. One of the greatest ways of learning from others is to be with others. In order to understand the issues surrounding race, build friendships with people from different backgrounds to your own. Number 4, don't fixate on side issues. Looting and police officer trolling are very real issues, but they are the side issues to the real issue of racism. Many of our police officers work extremely hard and genuinely care for our communities. Thank you. Many shop owners in the US, but also here, experience loss when people steal, when what's going on around them gets too much and they begin to loot. But looting is illegal and wrong, but focusing on it as the issue glosses over the real issue that's underneath it. We must focus on the real issue. Number 5, don't underestimate the uneven playing field. Understanding the gross inequalities that exist in our culture help us to know what needs addressing. When we think things are equal, we miss the reality of what really needs to be done. We all have a responsibility to respond now and seek to rectify the inequalities in our society. Lastly, we respond with love, with sensitivity, with action and with prayer. Love rather than hate, sensitivity rather than presumption, action rather than to sit on the side, and prayer, to pray and seek God for breakthrough in our nation, in the nations, and also in our hearts.